Welcome back to the Observable Unknown. There's a quiet assumption that knowledge survives, that what's discovered is preserved, that what's preserved is understood. History suggests otherwise. Entire bodies of knowledge, misfiled, misattributed, misinterpreted, not destroyed, worse than destroyed, misplaced in time. Tonight I have the privilege of speaking with the author of a work that examines something most people have never seriously considered: what happens when knowledge survives, but can't be correctly read, correctly dated, or correctly understood. The future that inherits it is at a loss, and for this release, I had the privilege of giving voice to that inquiry, which means tonight, we're not just discussing history, we're questioning whether history has been read correctly at all. My guest this evening is my dear friend, Jack Bialik, the author of Lost in Time, Our Forgotten and Vanishing Knowledge. This is Jack's second visit to the Observable Unknown, and what makes it special is we are commemorating the launch of his audiobook edition, one in which I had the pleasure of narrating Lost in Time, Our Forgotten and Vanishing Knowledge. So, without any further ado, let's join the conversation. Jack, it is always great to chat with you, and I am honored to have you back at the Observable Unknown. Of course, we collaborated in the audio edition, which is now released for Lost in Time, Our Forgotten and Vanishing Knowledge. And I have to say, having more time with it than not, I definitely realized you're driving at something pretty specific, something pretty particular. I recognize that the central claim is that clearly the knowledge humanity has amassed over time is vanishing. But can we say directly, do you feel that it's being lost or simply mislocated, misattributed, maybe?
Yeah, well, it's like humanity isn't just losing knowledge. It's forgetting the humility and wisdom that they need to stop repeating the same patterns of harm, both globally and personally. So we're forgetting how to stay wise, and not do this over and over again.
Do you feel there's a particular point to the lack of wisdom? Is it something that humans are engaging in because we're trying to survive? Do you think the lack of respect for knowledge that has come and gone and that we can benefit from is being obfuscated because of political tides? Where do you theorize the suppression of knowledge is really coming from?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like where we put our attention. Often we get distracted and we think about this or that, the most recent news, whatever's going on. And we have to keep, I really think that awareness is important in driving change. And so if we're aware that something is going on, we can take the right actions to do the right things for the future. Wisdom is just the proper application of knowledge. It's wisdom comes with experience. And there's two ways you can become wise. One is the easy way and the other way is the hard way. So if we want to apply wisdom to our knowledge, then let's do it the easy way. Let's not keep, putting our hand in the door and then slamming our hand on the door and going, ouch, that hurts.
Yeah.
If we look back in time, we can see how we keep losing our knowledge over and over again, and then refining it, regenerating our creations and our intellectual property, I guess I'll say.
Mhm.
But if we can just step back and think about things with the future in mind and not next week, think about things in 100 years or in 500 years or even in 1,000 years. How often do people think about that? Not often.
Mhm.
There is an organization called the Long Now Foundation. It's headed up by some pretty big people are involved with it in terms of their importance. I should look into them. They measure dates. They use five numbers. So this year would be 02026.
Mhm.
And their intention is to get people to think about things in a bigger way. way. They're building a clock in Texas that's going to run for 10,000 years.
Wow.
I think the clock is either done or almost done. So they're trying to get people to think about the big picture here, and that's what we have to do, both as world culture, as countries, as states and provinces, and as individuals. We all need to think about the big picture.
We do, and thank you for saying that out loud. It's very brave of you. Which do you believe has been more dangerous in your survey of history, destruction or misinterpretation as it regards the loss of knowledge?
Yeah, well, there's many reasons we lose knowledge. There's earthquakes, there's fires, there's floods, all kinds of natural disasters. Even, insects. I mean, you can look at it at many levels. But one of the biggest things is wars. Wars create a huge loss of knowledge. The war that was in Iraq, in Baghdad, we lost over 1 million artifacts during that encounter there. And it wasn't just from, the people on the soldiers and the people dropping bombs. It was also the people within the country itself that caused the loss of the knowledge there. So, war tends to really do it. And, we have a current war underway. We have wars underway.
Yeah.
And what are we losing in those countries where things are being destroyed?
I believe you were referring to Desert Storm. Do you have any firsthand knowledge regarding the artifacts and the information that was lost in that conflict?
Well, only what I've read. And there's a really good book by Polistron I think it's called Libraries on Fire is the name of the book. And he goes into great detail into all the artifacts that were lost and impacted by the war there. And it's really worth a read if you are interested in that sort of thing. But it is clear. UNESCO did a survey and for the 1900s, and they documented thousands of libraries that were either destroyed or partially destroyed. They even outline how many were done from because of wars and that sort of thing, and natural disasters as well. So I think they document the destruction and damage of over 6,000 libraries in the 1900s.
That's an interesting point because, as you mentioned in Lost in Time, the culling of certain texts is actually a normal process. You discussed at great length the library in San Francisco that gets rid of older texts that maybe haven't been in circulation for very long. Do you believe there's a lot of knowledge being lost to really survival techniques? Because we have so much space, we can only do so many things with it. Do you believe that we sometimes mistake survival for understanding?
Yeah, that's true. The reasons, of course, are multiple and many for why we lose these documents. Is it survival based? If we really, we just want to make sure that we're being wise about it, and thoughtful. If we are, and the people doing that are, then they're doing it for the right reasons and doing the right thing. That is part of being wise. What is required? What should we save? Should we save everything? It's interesting. They found a library that was thousands of years old in Mesopotamia, in that area. And they found, cuneiform tablets in that library. They found over 30,000 cuneiform tablets, and they were made in 600 BC. The library is Ashurupno, I think I'm saying that right. And you can find those in the British Museum. But the interesting thing about it is some of those tablets have what we would call receipts, receipts for things that were purchased or traded back in 600 BC. Now, you have to think, was that good? To keep those for a few thousand years? Maybe.
Maybe planning on a late return.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting for someone today to read it, I suppose, that they had, 400 ox or whatever, and they traded it for this other thing, whatever it was. But the same thing could go for us. Are we saving the right things? And I think that brings us back to the wisdom thought again, and being wise about it. And just saving everything isn't necessarily the right idea. Recently had the opportunity to clear out a home for one of my relatives that passed away. And, you go through all this stuff that they're saving and you're like, why did they save this? It's like, what purpose was there in this? Or even people taking pictures, and they take pictures of a tree or just a random building, and then they store it away for a lifetime. Is that the right thing to do? Is that the right way to use our resources? Is that the right way to, expend your time? I don't know that we really think about it. I think we just do, whatever comes to mind at the moment, and we're not thinking about the future and somebody's family that has to go and clean all this stuff and the amount of work it requires for someone.
Most of it is probably driven by sentimentality. You're not wrong about that, hoping that future generations might reflect back on the interior life of an ancestor and consider them fondly, we would imagine. But more often than that, I believe that it's just impulse driven. The concept of being attached to something that you don't think to dispose of. When we turn the lens, though, on political tides that shift and change, or even basic economics, lots of things get disposed of that we would do well to keep. You even outlined how many time capsules have been lost. The directions to where they were buried or stored and end up being misinterpreted or completely unknown in the future. How many of the things that have been saved do you believe were saved with exactly the intention you've outlined in mind to help future generations to improve upon the life that we're leaving for our children and grandchildren?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of, these people, they have really good intentions of saving everything, but it can be, unfortunately, as you point out, a lot of these things get lost. They can't find them. George Washington buried a time capsule in the White House in 1793, and it's well documented. You can even find the newspaper that has the article that, talks about, what was buried, but they haven't been able to find it, and they've even looked for it. And so these things happen all the time. I guess maybe I'll talk a little bit here about the Emperor Qin Shi in 210 BC, who built the terracotta warrior mausoleum for himself. And he buried over 7,000 warriors there in his library. It's quite, well, it's his library, his mausoleum, I should say. What a monument he built, even though it's underground. But the interesting thing about him is that his mausoleum, they won't open because
Hmm.
it's booby trapped.
Oh, okay. So it's off limits to the public.
Well, it's off limit. All the people that are studying the grounds there, they won't open it. The archaeologists won't open it because of what's been written about it and the dangers and the safeguards that he built into it. So we can talk about lost technology. What did he use? They say, and it's written, that there is a river of mercury that surrounds this mausoleum that he put there to protect itself. The doors of the vault where he is behind is built out of a type of rock that's magnetic, so that anybody trying to use an iron device to try to, break through the doors, it would attract, and you'd have great difficulty trying to crack through the doors. So, some of these things, even though maybe we can find them, we can't open them.
Why do you think that these kinds of steps are taken? Why would someone go through such labor to preserve their wealth or their identity or perhaps works of art and then keep it off limits from others? What do you think is the motivating force behind that?
Yeah, well, you see that a lot in Egypt, right? All the tombs there, how the people were entombed in the places in Egypt. They were buried with all sorts of artifacts, gold and silver and things. And the reason for that is that they believed that they would would be able to use those in the afterlife or when they came back to life, and that those articles would be of use to them. So somehow it's religious, or spiritual in their beliefs. And so they wanted to protect those artifacts from being found or taken.
In your section on the Terracotta Warriors, you discuss the use of chromium and how many thinkers believed that our use of chromium as a metallurgical additive was much later than what's presented by the tomb of the Terracotta Warriors. Do you believe this represents a misattribution of technology, where obviously we're believing that one culture developed some science or idea or way of thinking? Then, of course, later we're finding out it might have been given to them by an earlier culture, kind of a transcultural diffusion.
Yeah. Well, in many cases, what happens, it seems, is that when something is found again, it is without any knowledge at all that it was used before. Because when we did in the 1800s, when we started manufacturing with chromium, the terracotta army hadn't been found yet. So, that knowledge didn't get passed down. And there are many examples like that. The one that strikes me the most is the cranial surgery. Is that called trepanation? I think is the other term for it.
Mhm.
That was done in 400 BC in Peru. And what's interesting about that is that the Peruvians there did that surgery up until the 1400s. And in the 1400s, they were 90% successful in their cranial surgery, which is astounding.
It is.
But yet, during the Civil War, we were doing cranial surgery from people being injured there, and we were only 50% successful.
Mm.
So that knowledge didn't make the transition, as happens so often in history. And if it would have, it could have saved lives, really.
It really could have.
So we hurt ourselves really by not saving our knowledge.
Considering the lessons we learn by uncovering information that we've lost or that we've grown ignorant towards, why do you think it persists? Why does it continue that information isn't properly preserved?
Yeah, well, given this quite a bit of thought, and the one thing that kind of stands out to me is that sometimes we just don't give it enough importance. I almost say we don't care. We're not loving enough to ourselves or to our futures to care enough to keep that around. Whatever is going on is more important.
Yeah.
That war is more important than saving lives next year or in 100 years or whatever it would take, or 500 years. So I think it is a matter of, I think all this boils down to is it's a matter of growth for the world culture. At some point, we're going to have to become smart enough to realize that this knowledge we should keep. We shouldn't keep losing it. It's important, and it can help. It can help us later. It's almost like the example of the Middle Ages, where sewage ran off the top of buildings and into the streets, and may have contributed to the Black Plague and the negative effects from sewage like that. And yet, if you look at the Romans, they had sewer systems, they had water distribution systems. So what happened? Why didn't the people in the Middle Age? Certainly, they knew about Rome.
Mm-hmm.
They knew about what happened there. But why did Middle Age Europe decide not to do that?
The huge
That's the,
question.
that's the question.
You would think they would have learned from prior examples how to construct the things you would need to stay healthy and to
Yeah.
maintain public safety. We assume time capsules are the best method for clear thinking ancestors to preserve knowledge. You certainly seem to challenge that. What makes a time capsule fail in the instance that you brought up with George Washington and the problem of not finding the one buried under the White House?
Yeah. Well, the biggest problem with time capsules is that they get lost. So, how do you keep it in a way that, you want it to last a long time. So you put it somewhere that's really safe. So you go and bury it. Great idea. Well, it is a good idea. No question about it. It is safe. It's still there, but we just don't know where it is. So this begs the question of how can we come up with a time capsule that is ever present right in front of us and yet doesn't get destroyed when, some natural disaster occurs. There's a time capsule in Norway right now that is a seed vault. It's saving seeds, and this is up in the northern parts of Norway. And it requires that those seeds be kept at a very, very cold temperature. So they use the cold temperature that the seed vault is surrounded by as assistance to keep that vault cold, and to preserve those seeds. Well, today there is a potential problem that seed vault is at risk of getting lost because it's becoming warmer around the countryside there where the vault is. And if that happens, then we lose that seed vault. So, this is part of the problem. So we try to bury things to save it, and yet we can't find it. Here's something that we didn't bury. You can actually see it. There's the Slivabard seed vault. You can look it up. You can see it's in the side of a mountain with snow all around it. But here's one that's out in plain sight that people would be able to see for generations and generations. Yet it has a fault in that it depended on climate, and another natural thing is occurring, and we may lose that vault.
So then we would think of those styles of preservation failing technologically. Obviously, some failures are precipitated by the acts of humans, whether that's war or other kinds of acts that delete or change knowledge, editing in some cases. How would, on a grand scale, humans of today attempt at preserving safely and conveying safely the things we have learned and acquired through all of the research for the past 100 years to make sure that in 100 years, you believe the descendants of this generation would be able to make use of the information?
Yeah. Well, I'll go back to maybe your first part of your discussion there. Political change and turmoil also is a part of the knowledge loss and destruction. We'll talk again about Qin Shi back in 200 BC, and he had a library, and he believed that he was the only one that should collect texts and written documents that they had then. So he decided that anyone else, he first of all, he destroyed all their libraries. And then he said, if anyone else is caught with a scroll or whatever written words, that they would be punished and they would be tattooed on their forehead and then sent to work on the Great Wall of China as a punishment.
Terrible.
So, there are other forces at work that cause our loss of knowledge. And, so it's really going to take some people to put together a pretty smart, well thought out mechanism to save knowledge as we continue to go forward, so the destruction of it isn't at risk from war, or destruction of it isn't at risk from natural disasters or political motivations, so that generations can continue to benefit from whatever we've learned.
Well, and of course, cult of personality as well. I know it was very popular in ancient Egypt for reigning pharaohs to have the names of their ancestors wiped out, so it didn't appear that the public would think about anyone other than the current reigning pharaoh. Similar things have happened during the Cold War era, and some of these things seem to be happening now. Do you believe that as we move forward, organizations like the Long Now Foundation, or if there are others, can safely and successfully preserve information without it being threatened by changing political tides?
Yeah, for sure. They have an opportunity to do that. And they have done a few things along those lines. They have made discs that are made out of metal that doesn't rust or corrode. And they've put on this disc knowledge. Now, it's limited, of course, because it's not a huge disc. I don't know what it may be, twice the size of a record, maybe. But and they've written on it in very, very small text. But, and then they've sent it into space, onto space vehicles. And space isn't a bad idea, but will it be around? Will we be able to find it?
Well, that's the hard part. That's the hard part. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it seems like every choice you make has a downside. So it's very, very, it's a conundrum.
It is. It's a real paradox, mostly because we seem overconfident in our ability to decode historical artifacts. Look at how long it took for us to even learn hieroglyphics. If it wasn't for the Rosetta Stone, that would have never happened. Are there instances you've documented or studied where you recognize the same sort of problems happening, where we've lost the knowledge just because we've forgotten how to open it or read it?
Yeah. Oh, there are some famous examples. The Benoit manuscript. Maybe some of your folks have heard of that or listening. It's a very famous manuscript. It has records back to the 1300s. They think it comes from maybe something in that time frame. But that manuscript is very interesting. Over 100 pages are written in there. They've had the people take a look at it lexicographically. It is for sure a real language. They've been able to use computer analysis of the language, and they know that it's written in a way that it is a real language. There's different tests they can do on the way that the letters are used and that sort of thing. But the thing about it is they've been looking at this and trying to decode it for quite a long time. And even with people who study this sort of thing, they have not been able to figure out what the text says. You can even look the document up and see it online. It's very interesting how it's written, but it's unknown what it's talking about and what it says. So we have we have examples of that, and there's other examples. The Harpanen civilization, we have their texts. There's even $1 million reward out by the country there. It's near Pakistan. It's in Pakistan, I should say, is where the documents are at. It's northwestern India, but they have put up $1 million reward for anyone who can decode that language. Yeah, it's the government of Tamil Nadu announced that award for anyone. So people are going to work on that for sure.
I'm sure.
5,300 years old, but so far we don't know because we've lost the connection. We don't have a Rosetta Stone to tell us.
But how would an entire language be lost in your estimation?
Yeah, well, destruction.
Mhm.
So there's even some indication that area went through a huge, what do you want to say, exceptionally large explosion. Some people even think that there was some kind of a nuclear explosion in 2500 BC. They found sand that was glassified, from the heat was turned to glass, and cylinders that have been found that were radioactive. So, what those people found, maybe, or what they used, or what was used on them, who knows what happened. But, in many cases, mankind wipes out itself and loses the technology.
Causes the problem of forgetfulness, if you will.
Yeah.
We tend to treat history as a continuous narrative. Your work specifically disrupts that. Is history more fragmented than we admit?
Well, I would say it's continuous, but I would say it's cyclical. And it's cyclical in the way that these things keep happening over and over again. And I think maybe there's purpose in it. One of the ways you learn is by repetition. If you have to memorize something, you might read it over and over again. And maybe this is a cultural repetition we're going through to help us figure it out.
So, do you feel like we're trying to build coherence where none exists by thinking of history as a continuity? Is that an attempt to preserve it?
Well, it is a unintended consequence of trying to preserve it. We'll say, the fact that our loss keeps reoccurring. We just have to look at it and see. If you look at it, it's really clear. Keep keep doing it, keep losing our knowledge and keep refining it. So, it's just that the consciousness of the masses has to reach a point where it's not an individual. Individually we can see this, but as a macrocosm of the world, we have to see it as well. And that's the trick. And that's why it keeps happening over and over again.
The most haunting idea I came across in narrating Lost in Time was that knowledge can exist without being accessible. We all know this is a truth, but on the larger scale, it's very intimidating. How much knowledge do you believe currently exists but simply can't be used and never will be usable?
Yeah. Well, it's estimated that only 1.6% of our human history has been preserved. Only 1.6%. And so what does that say? That says that there's a lot that we don't have access to, that we don't know. So it's a majority proportion of it. Yeah.
Walk me through that calculation. To some degree, is it based on just what's in application, what's being used? Is it based on just the length of time that humans have inhabited Earth? That's such a small number, such a fraction of
Yeah.
the totality.
Yeah.
How do we calculate such things?
Yeah. So if we take a look and we estimate that humanity as we know it has been around for 300,000 years, and we've only been keeping records since how far back can you go? 5,000, 6,000 years?
Probably.
You know,
Well, go
a
back to Tepe.
bunch.
I think that dates to 8,000, doesn't it?
Yeah, 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 maybe 10. But we just recently found that.
That's true.
And now we're trying to figure that out,
That's true.
What happened there? What are they doing? Just amazing.
Well, I believe they were trying to make a time capsule. You go into great detail about how the structures were intentionally buried.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it very well could be a time capsule, but it was intentionally buried. So if it is saving knowledge, then where's the knowledge? It must be still hidden there somehow.
Apparently inaccessible, something that we wouldn't be able to decipher. Last time we chatted, you mentioned the possibility of going a bit deeper into that framework of Göbekli Tepe and civilizations that have left knowledge we don't yet grasp or understand. Do you have other instances? Of course, you did mention the Voynich manuscript. Are there multiples that you're working on now, thinking about how we have information available just within our reach, but can't really figure it out yet?
Yeah, there are many, and they pop up all the time. You'll see them. I just recently ran into the ancient Roman dodecahedron, and a dodecahedron is a 12-sided structure. Usually they use it in reference to crystals, but in this case, this is a artifact that the Romans used around the year 300, and they found 100 of these. And they're mostly made out of bronze. And the interesting thing about these is that they're 12-sided. There's 6 sides on top and 6 sides on the bottom. And each of the sides has a hole in it, and each hole is a different size. So some of them are large and some of them are small. They're all different sizes. And the interesting thing about these dodecahedrons is we don't know what they were used for. We don't know why they made them. There's no record of them. There's no written words about them. There's no pictures of them. Nothing. So, it's up to us to try to figure it out. But there's other examples, the big elephant in the room, the pyramids at Giza and the construction of those. Of course, there's a lot of conjecture. We have many different theories on how those were put together. Very intriguing, but we don't have a record of how they were put together or how were the stones cut out of the quarries. There is also a big question. I just did some simple math, 2.3 million stones, 3 tons or more each, 2.3 million. They estimate those were built in 20 years. So if you just do the math, that is, you have to put down one stone every 2 minutes, 12 hours a day, 365 days a year for 20 years. Now, how do you do that? It's
Yeah,
just,
I have no
it's
idea.
just amazing piece of architecture. So whatever they did it without wheels. They did it without pulleys. And the reason for that is obvious, is because they could do it, but they didn't need pulleys and they didn't need wheels. So they did it in a way that is, I think, lost. I don't think we have records of it. Yep, that's the problem.
No way of being able to replicate complicate the process. Now, we assume digital preservation will solve this problem for us now, does it?
Yeah, well, digital could help us to figure it out. However, digital can also lead to our demise, not our demise, but our loss of demise of knowledge. We see today that we're storing things on SSD drives and USB drives, which is great. You've got a huge density of knowledge that we put on those devices. However, those devices do not last long at all. How long does your computer last? Maybe 5 years. Take your USB drives. Those are solid state electronics. Some of those are designed on purpose to only work so many times. Look it up. In particular, NAND based drives, NAND based drives are designed on purpose to only work so many times. Now, it's a big number, no question. So they'll last, probably long enough, but there's a finite number. So we're building things today that are purposely, intentionally built to only last a certain amount of time.
Bringing up the subject of planned obsolescence, which clearly yourself as an engineer in the cellular technology industries would have known was a great tool to preserve future profits. How often has that method gotten in the way of preserving knowledge from generation to generation?
Yeah. So if we look at it from an engineering standpoint, a lot of times the way things are designed is by what they call use cases. How is it going to be used? And I believe that part of the thing about saving our knowledge for a long time is that we don't keep use cases that say, hey, I want to be able to use this in 50 years or 100 years or 1,000 years even. That would be way outside the realm of anything we design for. So today we design for form, fit, and function. We design for, it has to be cheap. It has to hold a lot, but we don't think about the future enough. The other day, I wanted to take get access to some old photos that I had. And so I went back and I pulled out 8 USB drives. I don't know how old they were, 6 years, 8 years old, something like that. Thumb drives. And out of the 8 drives, only 6 worked.
Wow.
So, 2 of them I couldn't even read. There was nothing, not that there was nothing on them. I couldn't read them, just didn't work. So, we have that too. And I don't think, and if I'm going to leave your readers or listeners with a thought, that is number one, for their own personal life, think about the knowledge that they're saving. If they're putting something away for the future, make sure you think about it. And, maybe you need to put it on redundancy. You need to put it on multiple devices to save it. Or maybe you need to print it on paper and save it that way. So just give thought to whatever it is that you're saving, and don't just think, well, if I just save it here, save it in the cloud, whatever, that it's going to last forever. It very well may not.
No, it very well may not. Do you believe with this that there's steps being taken towards improving that model, making sure we have more permanent ways of reading data, preserving data, conveying data into future generations? Is the Long Now Foundation working on that project?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. I don't believe that they're working on that, but there are some cases out there of organizations or companies that are doing something. There's something called M drives. It's like like a DVD drive, except these are intended to last 1,000 years.
Oh.
There is some work going on to save knowledge inside of crystals. I don't know if it's laser etching kind of thing or how that technology is going to work exactly, but so there are some places where they're trying to make some inroads, but no, it's very, very niche, very small areas technology.
Hopefully in time people will realize it's more important. So what does the road forward look like when it comes to your journey studying instances in history where knowledge was lost, and we are seeking to either find it, decode it, or otherwise preserve it? Do you have a second edition in the works? Are you doing a series? Just collecting research on your next project, maybe?
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking about that. Yeah, I've got in follow up to Lost in Time, our Forgotten and Vanishing Knowledge. We have the audiobook out now, thanks to you and your voice work there.
Thank you.
And I've got a follow-on, a couple of books that thinking about making. One is going to be a direct follow-on to this book with more examples and more ideas of things that I found since writing the initial book. The first book took 10 years, so the next one won't take 10 years.
Oh, let's hope not.
And also, I'm planning some trips. We're going to be studying megaliths and monoliths, both above ground and below ground, to try to figure out what the purpose and intent of those is. So I'll be doing some vlogging and doing some posts. If people are interested, they can go to my website, lostintime.world, and they can find all my social media from there and what I'm working on next.
It's excellent. Thank you so much. Also, there will be a link for listeners to go and purchase a copy of the audiobook edition of Lost in Time. But is there any place in particular you want to point them? I realize this is in the ACX ecosystem, so should they be going to Audible, or would you recommend they go to a different location? I'm just going to post the link that we've been using.
Yeah. Well, they have a couple choices, but I recommend if they want to just go to one place, I think they can go to lostintime.world, and you've got links there to the Audible edition, to the Amazon, and to the Apple. Links are all set there. Of course, they can go to their media and just search for the book name or my name, and they can find it there as well.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for sitting with me again, Jack. It is always a pleasure. Thank you, of course, for letting me cooperate on this project. It was a real pleasure, absolutely, and a joy to see which direction you take this in, hopefully before the next 10 years have passed. I'm anticipating something maybe in 1 or 2 years, we would hope, maybe even faster. Take good care of yourself, and I look forward to seeing you soon, Trent.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. We like to believe that knowledge accumulates, that it builds layer upon layer toward clarity. But what if it doesn't? What if it fractures and misaligns? What if it drifts across time until what remains is not truth, but interpretation, or worse, misinterpretation? What if the future isn't inheriting our knowledge, but our misunderstandings? Then the question can no longer be, what do we know? But instead, what have we already placed in the wrong time and mistaken for certainty? Because what you misplace in time, you don't lose, you misunderstand. If this episode has stirred some reflection in you, please leave a review wherever you've had a chance to listen to it. And if you'd like to write me directly, I can be reached at theobservableunknown@gmail.com, or you can text me directly at 336-675-5836. Further to this, if you're interested in a copy of Jack's latest audiobook release, the link for the Audible edition is in the description of this episode, and you may reach out to me directly if you have any projects that you're interested in having professionally narrated. Until next time, thank you for joining me in our attempts at preserving knowledge with clarity and authenticity.